I was talking to my wife the other day when she caught me off guard by asking if I prefer Alibre or FreeCAD, because we don't even normally talk about parametric CAD. I just told her that trying to choose between CAD platforms for me is like trying to choose between kids. You just can't. I love them both. I love them for different reasons, and I think that they are both glorious. In fact, I like almost every CAD platform that I use, except for one in particular. It asked if there is any benefits to using Alibre instead of FreeCAD. And I thought that that was a very compelling question, and I wanted to make a video on it, and I've been feeling like maybe I should. So, just as like you're trying to choose between your kids, I want to talk about the benefits of using Alibre, but not at the expense of FreeCAD because I love them both. So let's talk about some of the benefits of Alibre, which would be rebuild performance. Let's say that I have this part with this very long history tree and a bunch of fillets and dependencies, and I go to the very beginning and I edit the sketch of my extrusion. And if I add, say, a thou, right, 1 thou onto this dimension, and I go to rebuild this, then it must rebuild every single dependent item. In other words, everything in the history tree. And let's take a look at that rebuild performance. So I've changed my dimension, and let's deactivate the sketch and then regenerate to the last feature here. Here we go. And there we are. So that's about how long it took to rebuild and make an adjustment, and I have nothing broken. Let's jump to FreeCAD. Now if I open up the sketch behind my pad, and let's say I add 1/100th of a millimeter to that dimension. We're thinking about it already here. Alright, so we've had a little bit of time to think about the change that we made in the sketch. Now, to be fair, FreeCAD also allows you to skip recomputes on things, so you can skip that little intermediate time period and then recompute later if that's beneficial to editing, because if I were to edit this dimension, we'd wait the same amount of time for that to update. But let me close this, and this causes FreeCAD to start rebuilding immediately. And notice already I've got a broken pad here, so if I edit my sketch, right, this sketch is supposed to come all the way around here, but it looks like we've had a different topology naming issue that has broken the model. So most things are able to regenerate just fine, but on occasion you'll run into an issue like that where you'll have an error in the tree, but the graphics don't change because the graphics can't produce what the model currently looks like due to the error. So in this case, we've run into a topology naming error, but in other cases when I've had to rebuild on very long trees in FreeCAD, sometimes it takes a little while. So keep that in mind. You can run into topology naming errors on occasion, not all the time. And you also can face kind of long rebuild times. So Alibre, in this case, would be very friendly towards long history trees and good rebuilds due to topology naming and just working relatively fast for things that are heavy. Let's jump into Alibre features. Let's work on the guitar now. Alibre has some pretty amazing assembly features. One of my favorites is in context editing, so I can highlight, say, this part. In fact, right click it, we'll say edit here, and it allows me to see everything get a little bit more gray and transparent except for the part that I'm editing. And I can just begin making changes to my part. You'll notice I have multiple of the same knob here. So I can create a sketch, deactivate my sketch. We'll do an extruded cut, or what we might call a pocket. If we take a close look, you can see that not just one, but all of my parts that are redundant have been edited to update that because I put in multiple of the same part. So I can edit things in context just the way I want to, and it updates quite well. The next thing I can do is head on over to my assembly and exit out, right? So I've been able to edit a part while it's been in the context of my assembly, but it doesn't stop there. If I start a new assembly and insert, say in this case, a block, and I insert a second block here, and then I go to mate these, right? And the mating is very simple. Right, we'll apply, 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 right? That's not too bad. But I can still edit here. And maybe I want to edit my sketch and make the size of this block relative to this block, right? I'll get rid of this one dimension here, and let's, in this sketching environment, project a sketch. Maybe I'll project this edge into my sketch. And maybe I want this to be 2 inches from the edge always. Well, it may not seem all that interesting what I've just done, but if I go to edit this block now, and I make this something like 10, right? So this will get wider. Watch this edge as I update. I'll deactivate my sketch, and this block grows with this other one. So as you update parts, you can have other parts in your assembly update with them. It saves you a lot of time, and it gives you the opportunity for better design intent. So Alibre rather gives you the option to be able to not only edit in context, but edit assembly parts together and have them linked together, which can be a huge time saver and really simplify the design rather than having to open up a bunch of files and measure things and do things like that. So I think that's a huge advantage. And also Alibre has very stable, redundant constraints. So as you can see, I constrain this block to faces where I constrain several degrees of freedom several times. And with FreeCAD, it's a mixed bag when it comes to being able to use assemblies, because I don't recall having any problems with Assembly 2 Workbench having issues with redundant constraints. Assembly 3 has given me some problems, but likewise, right, if I were to go and create a sketch on this part, maybe I'll make a rectangle, I'll deactivate the sketch, and we'll do an extrude. We'll set that through all, and then I come to my block, we'll go back to our root assembly. There's no errors here, right? There's no problems. And that's because it's stable with redundant constraints, and it's stable with adding new features to the part. Now if I open up FreeCAD, this will change depending on which assembly you use. This was made in the A2 Plus workbench. Right, so I might go to the A2 Plus workbench. We don't really have in-context editing, but I can just go ahead and edit an imported part over here. So here I'll add a pocket where I'm going to say through all. There we go. So if I save and close my part, and then I go back to A2 Plus and I will update. Well, now I have a problem because I've added a feature and that's thrown off the topology naming. So it's with A2 Plus, it's very hard to rename, or I should say add features to parts and then have them update in predictable ways. Now this problem has been solved in the A3 and A4 workbenches. I haven't really touched A4. I know that A3 has occasional problems with redundant constraints. So A3 you have to spend a lot of time thinking about how to add constraints so that they're not redundant. So there are some problems with FreeCAD assemblies just being a mixed bag. But with every new version of FreeCAD, it amazes me, so I'm sure that these things are being worked through. All CAD platforms register errors when there's redundant constraints, but platforms like Alibre, SolidWorks, and so on have good algorithms that make it so it's kind of a non-issue. FreeCAD has algorithms that fix some redundant constraint errors as well. They're still under development though, so you will occasionally have some redundant constraint errors, but hopefully that will be developed very well in the coming versions. But as of right now, Alibre adds, I think, a lot of value in being able to handle assemblies. So throwing all that out, let's talk about fillets. So if I jump into FreeCAD for a moment, so here I have a compressor, and let's highlight one of these edges. There we go. We'll go to Part Design, add a fillet. So FreeCAD can fillet this, and as I add more radius to this, you can see that this edge becomes larger and larger. Now we may not care about the flow with the large fillet down here, but it seems like as this spins around, we'd want to have not much surface area on that edge. And there's not that much we can do, say if we want a 5mm fillet on the edge of the compressor. So let's take a look at Alibre. So we have a compressor in Alibre. Let's actually get rid of these fillets here. And I highlight an edge over here. Alibre has a nice little feature. Where I can come in and choose fillet, but I can check and make this variable radius. And then I'm given a start and an end radius. Right? So my start radius, if I make 0.02, and my end radius, I should switch these actually, 0.02 and maybe 0.05. Now I have a larger radius down here and a smaller radius up here. Again, let's take a look, maybe 0.25, right? So we can start very small up here and move very large down here. So that variable radius feature can add a lot of functionality to your designs, and I think it adds a lot of value. Now, there's also some things to take a look for with just general fillets as well. So in FreeCAD here I have a cube with a spherical shape taken out of it, and if I go to add a fillet there, and I'll add an edge here, and I say OK, and then maybe I want to add along this edge, another fillet, and I say okay, right, I get a failed to create fillet. So something about this gives FreeCAD a hard time to create a fillet. Now, to be fair, I can edit my fillet and simply add the edges in here, right? But in certain filleting situations, there isn't always a way around it like this, right? Sometimes you'll get failed to create fillet no matter how you go about it. It just fails to create a fillet. And it's very understandable because fillets are very hard to create sometimes. Now if I jump into Alibre, here if I go to add a fillet, and I'll reduce that, I believe we had these edges, and then I go to add another fillet, right? It goes right in. Now, this is an oversimplified example, but I would say in general, Alibre is more inclined to be able to add fillets, and because of that, whether you're working in injection molding or casting or something else, sometimes you just need a whole lot of fillets, and it's a real lifesaver to have something that can get the fillets done. So I think that's a huge plus for Alibre when you need fillets, and multi-radius fillets as well. The lofting in Alibre is really exceptional. So in FreeCAD, I've got these 3 sketches and I want to create a loft between them. That's great. But what if I want these to come out like normal to profile and then become normal to this profile and then add normal to that profile? That gets a little bit more complicated. In FreeCAD, I can still do it. Let me pull that up, but I won't use a loft. I'll have to turn it into a sweep. So in this case, I've got the same sketches, but I've added a center line that I want it to follow, and I've made it into an additive pipe, or what we call a sweep, instead of a loft. It looks something like this now, where it's normal to every profile. Now, here's a problem that starts to come up, because so far I've been able to get FreeCAD to act the way that I want to. However, if I edit the sketch, and in fact, it might be easier if I just get rid of this. And let's say I move this 30, maybe 50 millimeters away from where it was. Well, now I'm off plane from my path. So let's close that. And as we sort of move transitions, you can start to see that our end features might not come together the way that we want to because we twist at the end. So I'd have to get my path to move off that as well. And that's quite challenging. Now, I've made some videos where you can attempt that in FreeCAD. I don't think my method is perfect, but I think it gives some options, but it's, again, difficult and time consuming. If I move this over 100, it might exaggerate the effect, right? Just doesn't quite look the way that we want to. It would be nice if this section over here was a little bit more bendy. So this might update in better ways. So let's look at some of the tricks that Alibre has up its sleeve. First off, we can generate the same part that we had initially using the loft command. And then if I open up another example of loft, I've generated pretty much the same thing. I'm using a center point guide curve through the middle of this, just as before. But Alibre has a few other tricks up its sleeve that I really am impressed with. If I delete my loft here, I don't even need to use my center line because I can come over here and select these 3. And I can say, well, I want to have tangency in my first profile, and I can set that to a tangency of like 2. And you can see that we just automatically set ourselves up to be normal to the profile, which is hugely easy to do, and I can do that for each profile, right? I just check the boxes and add in 2 and 2, and you can see we're building that kind of tangency. Now, if that's not enough, right, I can always change my vector into 3, 3, and 3, or whatever shape that I want to, which is a lot easier than using a guide curve. Now, this way of constraining, if I go to edit my third sketch, is pretty useful, because if I do the same thing in FreeCAD, or same thing that I did in FreeCAD, and move it over just as before, and I'll constrain it in the same way. Make sure that we're horizontal here and here. We'll give this a dimension of 20 as before. I'll make this like 100. We'll deactivate the sketch. You can see that the whole profile is adjusted as we move over. So it gives us some predictable ways that we're updating. And if I take a look at the Lofting menu, there is a whole lot of tools that we're able to use here, right? We can use specified angles, which I go through in another video, by the Alibre All About Lofting video. We have tangent magnitudes that we can use, which make it hugely easy and nice to work with. We have options for guide curves. We can have a centerline guide curve, tangent, local, global, which I go through. I can change my twist profiles, and I can even specify no twist minimization if I wish. I can make everything ruled, which makes everything straight. There is so much power that goes into these FreeCAD lofts, or Alibre lofts rather. I guess I'm getting mixed up talking about two platforms, but the lofting in Alibre is pretty amazing. And so if you're looking to make organic shapes, I think you'll find that it's easier and you'll have a lot more power if you're just lofting solids. So those would be some of the main parts that I care about. Also, I should add shelling, right? If you wish to make things hollow, I find it to be quite predictable in Alibre, where other platforms have trouble. Shelling is a great advantage to just be able to click a face and make it hollow. In fact, with Alibre, if you play your cards right, you can shell in shells. Right, I just turned 2 parts hollow there. All right, I turned it hollow 2 times rather. So lots of power with shelling. I think it works quite predictable and easy. Alibre also makes it easy to pattern patterns. So FreeCAD uses multi-pattern, and I think that makes it a good solution for like 90% of whatever you do in FreeCAD. But I really appreciate Alibre, and this is Alibre Atom. If I make an extrusion down here, it makes it very easy to have an array. I also like the way that it dimensions the array, right? So I can say my linear path this way with, say, 2 spacing, and there we go. And then I can just stack on some features. And then I can create a linear pattern again, where I can choose my features, choose my linear path, and we'll change direction, right? And it is so easy to just build these kinds of arrays of features, and you can not have to worry about fitting everything into a multi-pattern and having it work out. So patterning patterns and patterning mirrors and doing all sorts of things is a little bit more straightforward. It has some of the same features like making a helical feature. Those are the big selling points for me. Now there are still a lot of things that Alibre can do that I haven't listed here. And I also want to reiterate that if you've watched this channel, you know I absolutely love FreeCAD, and I can't pick between my kids, and I can't pick between Alibre and FreeCAD. I love them both, and I think they make excellent companions together. I think FreeCAD will augment your abilities no matter what platform you're using, so get them both. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.